When we talk about Linux, what comes to mind for most people is power, freedom, and flexibility. Linux is often celebrated as the operating system that lets you do anything you want without restrictions. But if you've been using Linux in the last few years, you might have noticed something. Despite all its strengths, modern Linux is facing challenges. Challenges that are pushing users away or forcing them to seek alternatives. And it's not just about software. It's about the philosophy, the user experience, and even the future of computing. In this video, we're going to explore the problem with modern Linux and how distributions, yes, the very distros themselves, are finding clever ways to fix it. By the end of this, you might understand why Linux is evolving in ways you never expected, and why it actually matters more than ever. Let's start by looking at what Linux really is today. Linux is not a single operating system. It's a kernel, a foundation. On top of that kernel, distributions build entire ecosystems, package managers, desktop environments, pre-installed applications, and configuration tools. Over the years, Linux has grown into hundreds of distributions, each promising something slightly different. But with growth comes complexity. For new users, this can be overwhelming. You have Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch, Manjaro, OpenSUSE Debian, and countless niche distros. Each has its own philosophy, package management system, and quirks. What this means is that a newcomer who just wants a stable desktop might spend days, even weeks, figuring out which distribution actually suits them. That's not exactly the user-friendly experience Linux was supposed to offer. Then there's the issue of fragmentation. One of Linux's greatest strengths, its openness, has ironically become a weakness. With so many distros, forks, and competing package formats, developers often have to choose between making their software for a specific distribution or spending extra time packaging it for multiple systems. Flatpak, Snap, and AppImage were supposed to solve this problem, and they partially do, but they introduced their own issues like larger storage usage, slower startup times, and sometimes inconsistent behavior. Users now face the problem of not only choosing a distribution, but also choosing how they want to install software. And when software doesn't work out of the box, frustration sets in. Another challenge comes from the balance between stability and bleeding-edge innovation. Take Arch Linux, for example. Arch is adored by power users for its rolling release model, which gives immediate access to the latest software. But rolling releases also come with risks. Updates can break the system, dependencies may conflict, and sudden changes can disrupt workflows. On the other hand, distributions like Debian prioritize stability, sometimes at the cost of keeping users on older software. Modern Linux finds itself trapped between these extremes. Users want the latest features, security patches, and applications, but they also want a system that won't break when they need it the most. It's a delicate dance, and not every distribution is good at it. Then we have the issue of hardware support. Linux has made enormous progress in supporting modern hardware, but the truth is that it still lags behind Windows and Mac OS in some areas. Graphics drivers, Wi-Fi chipsets, and even peripherals like printers or specialized input devices can be hit or miss. This can be frustrating for users who just want Linux to work as seamlessly as other operating systems. And while Linux kernel developers are constantly improving compatibility, the pace of hardware innovation sometimes outstrips the pace of open-source drivers. Users end up having to tinker with kernel modules or rely on proprietary drivers, which goes against the very ethos of Linux in the first place. Security and privacy are another area where Linux shines theoretically, but modern implementations aren't perfect. Linux is often marketed as more secure than other operating systems. And for good reasons. Its permissions model, open-source transparency, and strong community support do help. But the reality is that vulnerabilities still exist, especially when users run outdated packages or install software from untrusted sources. And because Linux has so many distributions, patch management can become inconsistent. Some distros push updates quickly, others slowly. The net result is that users may think they're safe when they aren't, and that can have serious consequences. Now, let's talk about the user experience, which is often the most visible pain point. Modern Linux desktops have come a long way with beautiful environments like GNOME, KDE, ePlasma, and Cinnamon. But there's still a significant learning curve compared to Mac OS or Windows. Settings are scattered across multiple menus, applications behave differently depending on the desktop environment, and getting multimedia codecs, printers, or Bluetooth devices to work can feel like solving a puzzle. For new users, this inconsistency is intimidating. Many open-source applications are powerful but not always polished, and usability often takes a backseat to features. So what are distributions doing to fix these problems? Well, many are taking a user-centric approach that's less about ideology and more about practical usability. Take pop_os, for example. Developed by System76, it focuses on making Linux work out of the box, especially for gamers and professionals. It comes with pre-installed drivers, streamlined settings, and a thoughtful desktop experience. Then there's Ubuntu, which has increasingly focused on accessibility, ease of installation, and compatibility with modern hardware. Even Fedora, which is often on the bleeding edge, has worked on making GNOME more intuitive and reducing friction for everyday tasks. Another trend is the rise of universal packaging systems. Flatpak Snap and AppImage allow developers to distribute software across multiple distributions without worrying about dependency hell. While they're not perfect, they reduce fragmentation and make installing applications as simple as downloading and running a file. Distros are increasingly pre-configuring these systems so that users don't have to struggle with manual installations. This approach is slowly bridging the gap between Linux's flexibility and the user-friendliness that modern audiences expect. We're also seeing efforts to reduce the learning curve for newcomers. Some distributions are introducing guided setup tools, better defaults, and integrated help systems. For example, Linux Mint's welcome screen walks users through essential configurations, updates, and even software recommendations. Elementary OS goes a step further by providing a curated, consistent experience that resembles Mac OS, but without losing the power of Linux underneath. The idea is simple: make Linux approachable, but don't sacrifice control. Security and updates are also improving. Modern distros are increasingly adopting automated updates for critical components, sandboxing applications, and integrating more robust security mechanisms. Tools like SE Linux, AppArmor, and FireJail are being made easier to configure so that users can benefit from them without needing deep technical knowledge. In essence, distributions are taking responsibility for what used to be fragmented into hundreds of community guides and forum posts. Even gaming has become a priority. In the past, Linux gaming was a niche, often requiring workarounds and compromises. Now, thanks to Steam Proton, Lutris, and distributions like pop_os and Garuda Linux, gaming on Linux is more seamless than ever. Distributions are pre-configuring graphics drivers, Vulkan support, and Steam integration so that users can play popular titles without diving into the command line. This is significant because it demonstrates a shift in mindset. Linux is no longer just for developers and enthusiasts, it's for anyone who wants a reliable desktop experience. But perhaps the most important change is philosophical. Modern distros are realizing that Linux doesn't have to be a battleground of ideology. In the past, the Linux way often meant embracing complexity, tinkering endlessly, and rejecting proprietary software at all costs. While that has value, it also created barriers for wider adoption. Today, successful distributions are prioritizing user experience without completely abandoning the principles of openness, security, and transparency. It's a balance that, if done right, could finally bring Linux to a broader audience. All of these changes are interconnected. Better hardware support reduces frustration, universal packages reduce fragmentation, polished desktops reduce the learning curve, and security improvements build trust. What we're seeing is a convergence. Distributions are learning from each other, adopting best practices, and creating ecosystems where users don't have to choose between stability and innovation. The problem with modern Linux isn't that it's inherently flawed. It's that its diversity and openness created challenges for adoption. And the solution isn't one distribution dominating, it's that distributions are evolving to complement each other while reducing friction for the user. So why does this actually matter? It matters because Linux is no longer a niche hobbyist system. It's powering everything from cloud servers and supercomputers to desktops, laptops, and even gaming rigs. The choices distributions make affect millions of users, from casual home users to professionals relying on Linux for their careers. A more polished, user-friendly, and compatible Linux ecosystem means more people can benefit from freedom, security, and innovation. It also means developers can focus on creating better applications rather than fighting packaging issues or compatibility problems. In short, the evolution of distributions is not just a convenience, it's shaping the future of computing. Looking forward, the trajectory is promising. We can expect even more hybrid approaches, Distributions that combine the stability of Debian with the cutting-edge features of Arch, or desktops that offer elegance without complexity. We'll see more intelligent update systems that balance security and reliability, and more universal packaging solutions that make software installation nearly foolproof. Hardware support will continue to improve as manufacturers recognize Linux as a first-class citizen rather than an afterthought. And most importantly, the Linux community will continue to innovate, finding creative ways to reconcile power, flexibility, and usability. In conclusion, the problem with modern Linux isn't a single issue, it's a combination of fragmentation, complexity, hardware gaps, inconsistent user experience, and philosophical divides. But distributions are actively fixing these problems by focusing on usability, compatibility, security, and accessibility. Modern Linux is evolving from a system that demanded mastery into a system that empowers users. It's becoming more inclusive, more practical, and more enjoyable, without losing the core principles that make it unique. By understanding this evolution, we can appreciate that Linux is not just surviving in the modern era, it's thriving. And the way distributions are solving these problems will determine just how far it can go. For users, that means a future where Linux is more approachable than ever, capable of competing with mainstream operating systems while staying true to its open-source roots. The story of modern Linux is a story of growth, adaptation, and collaboration. It's about a community learning from its mistakes and building a system that's not only powerful but also accessible. And for anyone who has struggled with installing a driver, configuring a desktop environment, or simply getting an application to run, these changes are monumental. Linux is finally bridging the gap between what it promises and what it delivers. And that, more than anything else, is why it matters.